All right, we are taking our last look at every team's 2024 as a whole before we tick over into 2025. Today, it is my boys, the Demons. Don't think there's too much to discuss in this one, but before we do, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you think the Demons went in 2024. I think it went pretty well by all reports. So let's crack in. This season review is brought to you by Skills Beast, the best teaching apparatus to learn how to kick effectively with the correct technique every time. No matter what your age or skill level, Skills Beast will transform your kick. Head to skillsbeast.com to instantly kick better. And here to help me break this down, and hopefully not break down, is Darren Parkin, AFL commentator and analyst. Darren, where do you even start?
Well, yeah, it certainly wasn't boring, the Dees season. There was a bit going on field and particularly off field. The headline section will go for a little while, but I guess if we look at the nuts and bolts, they've gone from premiership to top four down to 14th. So probably hard to argue that they weren't the most disappointing side in the competition. I know you look at teams that have sort of been languishing in the bottom four, or Richmond falling over, or St Kilda and Adelaide and teams like that falling a bit short of the mark, but Melbourne definitely on the scale of all of that and the talent they had on their list, they're about 20 points a game worse off, which is significant. So they were about 2 goals a game worse scoring, about 8 points a game defensively. They went from last year having the second best percentage in the competition, ranked second defensively and fourth for scoring, to dropping all the way down to a percentage of 98.5. So dropped about 27 percentage points through that time and became, I think it was the 7th best defensive team in the comp. And if you look at that start where they played Sydney in the opening round in a pretty competitive, hard-fought game against an eventual grand finalist, lost that narrowly, then won their next 4, including back-to-back games at the Adelaide Oval against the Crows and Port. So they looked in pretty good shape at that stage. But yeah, from there on in, I think they went 7 and 11. And there's obviously a lot of reasons why that happened. Yep,
and we will get into that. But for now, let's get over to the 2024 pass mark. So coming into the year, they're coming off the 2 back-to-back top 4 finishes, but also straight sets exits, as all Dees fans like myself will know. Coming into this year, you'd think it's pretty much they had to either do that again or at least get to a prelim. Just win a final, really.
Yeah, I think that the bare minimum was win a final, and the expectation would have been to seriously challenge for the flag, based on the fact they'd been in the top 4 for as long as they had, and even the way they'd lost the finals the year before. They lost to Collingwood when they had about 30 more inside 50s in a qualifying final, and then they kicked poorly against Carlton in the semi when they could have won that as well. So they were right in the frame to push a fair bit deeper. In those years, the season didn't start well with the Brayshaw news, important player, out for the year. But the way they started with 4 wins in the first 5, Oliver was back playing at that point, that things kind of looked okay. But yeah, it did drop away quite dramatically from that point on, and a definite fail.
Oh, yep, definite fail, big time. So the lowlights for the Dees, I mean, we've done a couple of these reviews already, but this is a pretty long list.
It is, yeah. I mean, if you want to put a positive spin on it, I think a lot of what was happening off-field spilt over on-field. On-field, there's still a bit of talent there to work with, which we might talk about a bit later on. But, their own football department review admitted that the off-field issues and the headlines, which we will touch on more later with Petrarca, Oliver, the Glenn Bartlett versus the board, Joel Smith's suspension, Brayshaw's forced retirement with concussion. But, I mean, just a couple of the other ones. So Gary Pert's infamous best culture he'd seen in football comment, Kate Roffey quitting, which largely, I mean, there were a few factors in that, but an interview she did on the radio at SEM was fairly poorly handled around a few things that were going on at the club, and it felt like they weren't fully accepting of some of what was happening in that space. Max Gawn's spoken in the off-season about the frustration at every time they have a meeting at the club. It seems to be in the news 15 minutes later, and he doesn't know who's leaking it and where that's all coming from. So I think all of that just led to them being unstable. But if we were to put a positive slant on that, there's enough good players there that if they can get the back house in order, there's still a bit to work with.
Yep. All right, so just to let me have a breath for a second, let's take a look at some highlights because, in a pretty dour year where we weren't doing that well on field, the defence was still quite sound, ranked 7 in defence.
Yeah, I mean, there was only a couple of standout breakdowns. The game against Fremantle in Alice Springs, where they got hammered in that match.
And then another one against Fremantle.
Yeah, and another one as well. But over the course of the year, when they had their defence intact, and Lever and May and a few of those guys, they were still ranked 7th. And fairly competitive. They were a hard side to score against, didn't give up massive totals. Judd McVie started to play, really reliable footy as a lockdown defender and could get a bit of the ball as well. He's did his apprenticeship at VFL level with Casey and looked really good. Another one who's done the same thing is Jacob Van Rooyen, who used to play sort of centre-half forward ruck at Casey, then came into the side and kicked about 30 goals for the year, signed a long-term deal. If you look at Ben Brown's retirement and the age of a couple of others, then he represents, a bit of the future for them. So there was a bit to like, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the transforming the game, but Trent Rivers, another one of those as well. Yeah.
I think I really like the Jacob Van Rooyen call. I think one of the big criticisms of Melbourne for the last couple of years is that we haven't got a forward line with Ben Brown out, Tom McDonald heading back. But Van Rooyen and Daniel Turner also coming along. So we do have a young forward line sort of starting to take shape. I think it'll still take a couple of years, but I think that's a highlight. It's going good. Okay, this next segment is brought to us thanks to Skills Beast, who have been helping AFL players of all skill levels transform their kicks. So, who transformed their game for the Demons in 2024? Trent Rivers.
Yeah, there are a few that stepped up. We mentioned Judd McVie earlier, but yeah, Trent Rivers spent a lot more time in the middle post the Petrarca injury on the King's birthday. So he averaged 23 and a half possessions a game after that day when he was spending a lot more time there. Ended up leading the club for disposals over the season. Now, a couple of their big guns didn't play every game. Guys like Petrarca or Oliver would have taken that mantle most likely, but had nearly 500 touches for the year, and he was a real valuable addition into that. If they can get everybody else back and then obviously still have him, then I think that puts them in pretty good shape through a midfield group that's still pretty strong.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty interesting next year, getting Petrarca back, getting Oliver back into some better form, whether Trent Rivers stays in the midfield as much. Obviously, Cozzy Pickett also running through there, so but good one, Trent Rivers. All right, if there's one thing that we know at zerohanger.com, it is headlines, and I'm pretty sure 90% of the headlines at zerohanger.com this year were about the Dees. So where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, you can put some positives on some of these in the way they've all unfolded, in the sense that a lot of players were linked with a departure but didn't go. So, I mean, they're still there and still a chance to mend those relationships.
Best culture I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, that's right. Maybe that's true. But Christian Petrarca, obviously, there was the horrific injury in the King's birthday clash, how that was handled, the disappointment that he felt. Certainly put the feelers out. It looks like a trade was just logistically far too difficult, so they had to backpedal on that. But he's an unbelievably professional athlete, went straight overseas, working on his recovery. So there's no issues whatsoever with what his commitment will look like when he comes back. Clayton Oliver, I mean, at the end of 2023, there were whispers of them potentially trading him, and then again in 2024 with Geelong around the mark there. So what headspace is he in? I mean, his CV, I know it's a big call if you look at Ron Barassi and Robbie Flower and those sorts of guys. Clayton Oliver would be a chance on trajectory to have the greatest CV in the history of the Melbourne Footy Club in terms of best and fairest, league MVPs, could win a Brownlow, premiership player, played superbly in that game as well. Like, he's an elite player. You don't move guys on like that unless there's compelling reasons. Obviously, Cozzy Pickett, there was rumours of a departure but didn't happen. Looks like they wrapped up the Glenn Bartlett saga where he was moved on in their premiership year, and in and out of courtrooms and the like, and discussions about unfair dismissal and various other bits and pieces. Joel Smith's suspension at the start of the year, that all blew up, and that's another major headline for them. And then obviously Brayshaw, forced retirement, which was incredibly sad. A very skillful, important player, part of their premiership side, and not the first player to be forced into retirement from concussion. But a big blow for his club, and certainly a cruel blow for him. Yeah,
I think what did go unnoticed, actually, until he made that speech at the Brownlow later in the year, especially on field, I think a lot of people didn't realise what an effect losing Brayshaw had on the team, not just like culture-wise, but he plays a really important role. He was playing on the wing. You could pretty much slot him anywhere there was a hole. You could put him there. In hindsight, how do you view how that Petrarca injury was handled.
Yeah, look, I think so. Petrarca, I mean, if you looking at the game in itself, look, clearly he was in a bad way, and the reports are that even the Collingwood players after halftime were looking at him thinking, what are you doing here, given what happened to you? And look, he's going to do everything possible to try to play, and there needs to be some degree of medical responsibility. Obviously, you can't necessarily scan them at halftime and know just how bad it is. A lot of it is on looking at the replay of the incident, asking the player how he feels, and just basic things like that. But yeah, I think maybe that was him with his ultra level of professionalism, feeling that wasn't matched by those who needed to support him in the moment. But I think when it comes to pre-season and round one, he'll be fine. And you tie in Petrarca and Brayshaw. I think in the final series the year before, because Melbourne had so many forwards out, they were playing Petrarca deeper, and then Brayshaw gets knocked out in the Maynard incident against Collingwood, which means that Petrarca has to go back into the middle. Their forward line suffered. So, there's a bit of an overlap between the way those two, Petrarca with the broken leg in the finals the year before that as well. So, yeah, those two have been kind of front and centre of their September issues in recent times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now that we're a couple of weeks, months removed from, Melbourne haven't made the news in a bad way in 4 weeks or so, which is a long time considering the context of this year. I think it did seem, at least from a Dees fan, that a lot of it was overblown. Although seeing Max Gawn have to front up on Triple M every week and just discuss things that he didn't want to discuss, I think was a really interesting dynamic for the year. So all in all, big headline year for the Dees. So the ins and outs for the Dees, we'll start with the outs. So Ben Brown retiring, Lockie Hunter retiring, obviously Brayshaw retiring as we mentioned before. Adam Tomlinson pretty stiff.
Yeah, had an unlucky career, obviously Giants, and then the Dees was tracking really well. Did his knee at the start of their eventual premiership year in 2021, and that opened the door for Petty to come back in. He's been around the mark, Adam Tomlinson, but yeah, just a nearly career for him. Obviously Joel Smith delisted for obvious reasons with the lengthy ban. Josh Shackey's had obviously a few cracks at it and didn't quite get there. Had his moments, but played in the grand final against the Dees in that same year in 2021. But and then obviously Alex Neil-Bullen returning back to South Australia, his home state. So that's a bit of a loss for them. And then obviously Lockie Hunter retiring after coming across from the Dogs, as you said. They've sort of picked up a few of those wingman types, he, Jack Billings, and a couple of others in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the one that I'm most upset about that from an on-field, besides Brayshaw, is probably Alex Neil-Bullen. But you can't blame him for going to Adelaide for family reasons. So, in terms of players gained, we've talked about it recently with the draft and trade period, but I think one thing that Dees fans are always pretty happy with is the way that we draft and the way that we, probably not recruiting in terms of trade, but the way that we draft has always been pretty good. Yeah,
and I think they've nailed their two picks. Harvey Langford, one of the elite mids at the start of the draft. Xavier Lindsay, very skillful left footer from Gippsland. Aiden Johnson also comes into the club. They've got obviously a couple of Category B rookies. Tom Campbell, one of the great journeymen, makes it club number 4. So North Melbourne, the Bulldogs, the Saints, and now the Dees. So he was a delisted free agent. They get Harry Sharp from Brisbane via a trade, but obviously Tom Campbell's just there in the event that Max Gawn missed a lengthy period of time, but or if he needed a rest in the middle of the year. But look, Tom Campbell's getting 45 hitouts a week in the VFL, so he'll do a job if he's called upon, even if he's not Max Gawn.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a need for somebody to take a bit of a load off Max. So let's take a look ahead to 2025 now and the pass mark. So heading into 2025, as a Dees fan, I'm not even going to mention on-field performance. Maybe you could take on-field performance for me, but my pass mark is just to stay out of the bloody news, to be honest.
And I think if that happens, if they stay out of the news, there's enough talent there. If everyone buys back in, they're not too bad. I mean, I don't know exactly where it lands now. I mean, if you go top four, miss the 8, are they still the top 4 side who had a horror year? If you break the forward line down as being a bit of an issue for them, it's been horrible timing in recent years. A couple of years ago, they threw Petty forward. He kicked 6 or 7 against Richmond, then got injured. Melksham was playing well late in the year, did his knee. Ben Brown was out. McDonald's played at both ends, but also had his injury concerns. It's been very difficult. Then Van Rooyen got suspended in the finals as well, and then obviously last year similar with a stack of injuries in their forward line. So if they get a run at it and everybody invests and says, "Yep, I'm here," and I'm sick of all of this other stuff, it's time for us to knuckle down, then they're still a pretty good side. So I would think that they definitely be amongst the top 8 most talented lists in the competition, so that should be a base level for them, I would think.
Yeah, I think the thing that I always think back to, and I think Max also said this on radio, is that after that 2018 final series, then we had 2019, which was, I think we were 17th that year or something. We won like 3 games. Yeah, something like that. And then we bounced back 2020, and then obviously the premiership in 2021. So it's not out of the realm to have a down year and then, hit back and get into the top 4. I think I would be happy with finals, but then if we get into finals, you'd want to win a final. So I think that's probably where most Dees fans sit.
Yep, I'd agree. I think they're capable of doing all of that. The issue is that, can they win the flag? And I don't know. Like maybe. I'm not going to say no, but because they were tracking that way for a long time. So we'll wait and see pretty early in the season how it all lands.
Yep. Well, that wraps it up for our 2024 season review for the Melbourne Demons. Thank you, Darren.
Yeah, interesting one, that's for sure. And I think they'll want a bit more of a boring season next year, the Dees.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let us know in the comments what you think. How do you rate the Demons' year? Please be nice, I guess. I almost cried during this one. So like, comment, subscribe. We're going to be doing season reviews for every team in the lead up to Christmas, and we're going to be doing a lot more next year. So get subscribed and catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. This season review was brought to you by Skills Beast. Instantly kick better. Head to skillsbeast.com for more info.